In August of 2022, I began a program called Leadership Atlanta alongside a select cohort of leaders in Atlanta. They're here. The intent of the program is to educate leaders on the issues facing our city in areas like education, criminal justice, and leadership, while looking specifically through the lens of race and ethnicity. For the duration of your 9 months in the program, you're part of a study group led by an alumni of the Leadership Atlanta program. This group, it's your home base. It is the place where you bring your learnings, your questions, your frustrations, and your ideas. It is also intended to be the safe space where you can have meaningful conversations and you can ask the questions that you don't necessarily have the place to ask. One of the most thought-provoking encounters I had during my time in Leadership Atlanta occurred during one of these study group meetings. I began to hear firsthand stories of the people of color in my cohort. Stories of extreme poverty, inadequate housing, lack of access to protection, educational barriers, indifferent medical care. And in all of my whiteness and privilege, I was just simply appalled. But the thing that crushed me, it broke me, was listening to the parents in the room talk about the worry that they carried because their children were black males. And the conversations that they had to have with their children that me, as a white woman, would never comprehend having to have. I was simply overwhelmed with the magnitude of these issues, and I desperately wanted someone to tell me what to do to help. So one night during group, I said, listen, I am a CEO of a financial services firm. I have a 5-year-old at home. I had a nursing infant at home at that time. I had aging parents. I have nobody here to help me. I want to be an ally, but I don't know how to help. But when I ask you the questions, how can I help you? I sense a frustration. Can you please tell me about that frustration? And one of my sweetest friends in that group looked at me and she said, Heather, don't you know we have all of those same issues and we're black? And in that moment, it felt like a wave washed over me. And I realized that the tired that I felt, my tired, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. But her tired, there's no light. It is a generational tired that she carries based on a physical attribute over which she has no control. And in asking her to educate me on how to help her, all I was doing was adding to her weight. How unfair of me was that? And so in that moment, I realized it's not her job to educate me. It's my job to educate me. And I took that incredibly seriously. And so I asked myself in the moment, I am the leader of a financial services firm. I have graduate training in professional counseling. What am I uniquely gifted to lean into to educate myself on? I can't talk about the law. I have friends that can do that. I can't talk about fighting hate crimes. I can't talk about any of that, but I can tell you what I can talk about. I can talk about money, and I can talk about how to build generational wealth but I didn't know anything about the disparity of wealth as it relates to race and ethnicity. But thankfully, there are some really smart people who have dug into that subject. So I'm going to share a few of those points with you today. This is the current racial wealth gap. This is from the St. Louis Fed, the Institute for Economic Equity. For every $1 of white wealth, the black community has 24 cents on average of wealth, and the Hispanic community has 23 cents on average of wealth. If you look at the disproportionate wealth to population, the black community is 14% of the U.S. households, and yet they hold 4% of the wealth. And if you look specifically at Atlanta, as of 2022, the U.S. Census Bureau showed that Atlanta has the highest income inequality of large U.S. cities. The median income for a white family is $83,000 compared to $23,000 for a black family. And if you are born into poverty in Atlanta, you only have a 4% chance of escaping. I pushed back from my computer and I said, it's too big. The problem is too big. I don't know what to do. How do you even start to solve a problem this big, this ingrained? And in that moment, that's the moment where most people give up. All hope is destroyed. There is no chance for change, restoration, resurgence, and they just give up. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it was in that moment that the Spirit simply whispered to me, what if you don't? What if you actually believe that things can change? There's a favorite quote I have. Many years ago, saw this quote and I thought, oh, man, that is powerful stuff. Admiral James Stockdale, he was a naval aviator and officer in the Vietnam War. He was taken as a prisoner of war in Hanoi. He spent 7 years as a prisoner of war. And what he said was, you must never confuse faith. I love that, faith. That you will prevail in the end, which you cannot afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. So I asked myself, okay, Heather, you have the faith. You know it can change, because here's what I do know. I do know that the Lord fills in the gaps. He just does. But he fills in the gaps when I do all that I can. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to reframe this problem. I'm going to do the thing that I know how to do, which is to walk into really big problems and figure out where to start. And so this is what popped into my brain, which is really on the top of this model. You have the systemic issues that relate to solving the racial wealth gap. Access. It's all access. Access to education, access to financial institutions, access to advice, access to fair income and opportunities. All of those things. You should feel the weight, because that is the true current reality of the system. But guess what? There is hope. And you know why? Because on the bottom, in the grassroots, there is the belief, the individual decision making that we have, the power of choice that we have. Nobody can take that away from you. Your ability to lean in to your heart, to your money stories, to your beliefs about money, and to reconcile those beliefs and allow them to help you make better financial decisions, nobody can ever take that away from you. And the ability to move that into your community and create momentum for change, nobody can take that away from you either. See, there's a few truths here that I'm going to share with you, because the art of building wealth, it's an art and a science. And I'm going to share with you today the art and the science, just a few core simple truths. You can every single one of us, you can uncover what you believe about money. You can talk about the stories, the experiences, the things that you have learned in life about money through just being you. You can uncover those. Your decision making, it is always within your control. And the third thing is that there's only a few core financial principles that make all the difference in the world. This elephant, the truth about the art of building wealth is understanding that 80% of our decisioning actually comes from the emotional elephant. Our stories and our beliefs and what we have experienced drives our decision making. So just name it. Name it. Take your power back over it, because it's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you can harness the power of that elephant and you can begin to allow it to reframe how you make decisions, that is when you are no longer tethered to the past. You have the ability to do things differently. This became very tangible to me over Labor Day. My two sisters flew in, and we had to move my parents out of their home of 32 years. We'd been trying for at least 5 years to get my parents out of their home. Lots of falls, lots of issues. They couldn't financially or physically handle living in that house anymore. But they couldn't face it. They wouldn't face it. Because, see, they grew up in poverty. And the fear of being without kept them stuck in a place that was crushing them. It was crushing them financially. It was crushing them physically. And we couldn't get them to move. And so when in 4 days, we packed our parents up. We sent them out to their new home. And my head knew something that my heart has actually not quite processed yet, which is the fact that my parents have not lived fully in a very long time. And they didn't live fully because they couldn't face their current reality. They couldn't face the fear. And I am here to tell you today, yes, you can. We all can. It does not own you. And the moment that you call it, the moment it loses its power over you. These choices, they have generational impact for your families, for your children, for their children. You have the courage to stand up and call it what it is. That is the art of building wealth. The science of building wealth, it's actually fairly simple. There's really only 4 things that you can do with wealth. You can grow it, you can protect it, you can give it, and you can live it. That's it. And each one of these pillars has a basic core financial principle that you can then build into your life. Grow. Compounding interest, interest on interest on interest. Save. And the longer you save, the better your chance of growing wealth. Protect it. Where do you have risk? And you mitigate that risk. Diversification. It matters. Giving. Giving is critical. And I will tell you that my faith says it is better to give than it is to receive. It has physical impact to you. And living. Live within your means. Budget. It is the number one thing that will determine success or not. This is the formula. Know your stories and how they affect your decisioning. Practice your core principles. Be consistent over time and make progress. Because the question is no longer, what can you do to help? The question is, what will you do to help? Thank you.